Hey, grovelers, here we go. Got some gas. Got some coffee. Okay, so let's keep talking about the hands. We can talk about the feet too. I mean, the feet are important, but that's the secondary gateway. Primary gateway is the hands. Everything goes through the hands. Not only the hands physically doing things, they are giving us constant real-time feedback in terms of how to manage everything else. So they're actively pushing energy or allowing energy or conducting energy into the club. They are managing the inertia from the club coming back at us. And they are playing a primary role in our understanding, our management of all these fast moving parts. Another way, because there's just so many examples of why this is going to why the apostrophe will continue to reign as the overriding theme of what makes the golf swing work and allows us to manage it as well as we can. Let's look at an example. So I work with here would be a good example, pretty good example. I've worked with a number of adaptive golfers, so that would be disabled golfers, people that are amputees for the most part. A lot of them are veterans that went to Iraq or Afghanistan, but so we help those guys out a lot. So I've worked with a lot of them, try to fit them for clubs, and inevitably we start talking about how their golf swing works. And obviously we get all types. The most common types we get are guys that have one leg amputated at the knee, and guys that have lost an arm. And all of them can play. There's tournaments they play in and stuff, and a lot of them are pretty darn good. But they're for obvious reasons, they're at a disadvantage. Now, if you're looking at, so I've worked with a lot of guys that are missing a leg and a lot of guys that are missing an arm. If you guys had to guess, who is at a bigger disadvantage? Hopefully, even at the groveler level, you guys know the answer to this question. Obviously, the guy that has lost an arm, that is only swinging with one arm, is at a bigger disadvantage, because it's a governor not only in the amount of energy you can feed through the system, but it's also more difficult to manage just the positioning of the golf club, right? Now you can I can hit the ball pretty well with my right arm, especially if you give me like an hour to practice it. Like when my back was really bad, my dad wanted to play golf, and he kept saying, "You got to get out and play golf again." And I was like, "Yeah." And this was my back was pretty bad. I went, "I'll hop in the cart with you, Dad, and I'll hit a few shots." And I was just hitting them one-handed, and I shot like 41 on the front because I had done this before just for fun. I think that hitting pitch shots with just your right hand is a really good drill, so I'd done that, and then I'd hit some longer shots. And I kind of, being a golf pro, I kind of know where everything's supposed to go. So it takes you a few to get used to it, but it's not that hard, but you can't move it nearly as fast. If you normally hit a driver 280, 290, you can hit a driver, 220. But you give up quite a bit. And what's interesting is that the change of direction, the transition, is really the key if you want to swing with one arm. But if you told me you could do that, or you could not have the ability to use one of your legs, I would choose that. Just because if I could put both hands on the club, I can actually move it quite a bit faster, and I can control the orientation of the club at speed better. Now, it's not a perfect analogy, because the guys that are at least missing the part of the leg under the knee, they have a prosthetic, so they do have a balance point there, right? So they can obviously they're favoring their good leg, but that balance point does help, versus when you have an amputee with the arm, he can't put the other arm on it at all. He can't use it really at all. So in some sense, that's not a perfect analogy, but it also in some sense supports the theory, because having the hands on and controlling the golf club through the hands is so important that if you take the hand off there, you're, even though the guy's at more of a disadvantage, it's even more illustrative, is that a word, that the hands are important, right? It just becomes a real puzzle to solve, a more complicated puzzle to solve. And there is an upper limit on the energy you can push through the club, significantly more than even if you were standing on one leg. I mean, you had some balance issues, but you could still swing the club faster standing on one leg than you can standing on two legs and hitting it with just one arm, right? So that's partly why the hands are the main gateway, and the feet are important, but they are the secondary gateway, right? So in the secondary gateway, that's why it's called ground reaction forces. You're putting forces into the ground, and the ground is putting forces back into you, right? And so we've got bi-directional things happening through both the feet and the hands, and they're both important, but the hands are the most. The hands are the most important. So everything goes through the hands. Everything goes through the hands. What's another way to look? What's another thing to discuss about it? This gets back to a little bit trying to kind of outflank the confusion. So now it's important that you have like experience in the sense that you should know generally where the hand should be at the top of the swing, let's say. So let's say you're looking for a top of the backswing position. You need to be able to know, okay, this is wrong, and this is wrong, and this is better, right? So you need to have some general sense of positionally where the butt end of the club, where the grip should be, where the hand should be at the top of the swing. But if you pay attention to, like when I've worked on, let me go back further. Let me go back into the origin story. So originally when I was learning the golf swing, and this is just, I learned it this way because this is the era I started thinking about it. This is the era I was in. So your environment, when you learn stuff, has an important impact on the origin story of the foundation of what you were trying to learn. So I started paying close attention and started to try to understand the golf swing in the late 80s and early 90s. So that was when generally golf instruction was moving out of the swings you would have seen in the 60s, but primarily the 70s. And it was moving into what we would consider the big muscle swing. So the Ledbetter, McIlgrady is when they were having a big impact on tour players. And the whole thing was you were trying to square the face up with the big muscles, not with the little muscles of the hands and arms. Those were more prone to manipulation. Those were more prone to breaking down under pressure. The big muscles were controlling the way the face squared up at impact. It was controlling the radius of the swing, the big muscle swing, the body release, all that stuff. It turns out that's all nonsense, honestly. It's just all nonsense. Now, I think the real effect is that what they did, where they helped some guys, is that they probably tightened up the movements. Like there was a way of trimming the fat off the swing, so it actually, it probably tightened up the pivot, overrun with the arm swing. It probably did things like that. Took some excessive lateral motion out of the swing. So it would take, by taking away those extraneous movements, it probably made some guys more consistent. But the mistake was thinking that the big muscles squared the club face. That's not happening at all. But if you wanted to make a swing that looked like a tour swing in the late 80s and the 90s, you would be thinking quiet hands, quiet feet. Like you weren't dancing around on your feet at all. Your footwork was really quiet. You were staying pretty flat-footed. You would roll into the ankle. Everything was pretty rotational, torso rotation, and hands really quiet, trying to take the flip out of it, trying to take some forearm rotation out of it, right? So a lot of times you were thinking about hips and shoulder movement, some of the core movements, but you were kind of trying to not do much with the feet, and you were trying to not do much with the hands. And that literally couldn't be more wrong, right? Not in terms of in the terms of the way you're going to figure out how to manage the operation, all these fast-moving parts, and ignoring the two main gateways, the primary gateway being the hands, the secondary gateway being the feet. No, that's not from a standpoint of you trying to conduct it, because the conductor is obviously, if you said, well, no, the most important parts are the brain and central nervous system. Yeah, sure. I mean, the brain is the conductor in the orchestra, to make everything work in a concert of motion. the central nervous system. But the real-time monitoring and drivers of what's happening with the parts that are moving are those gateways, right? So what would happen was I would learn early on to try to quiet those things down and almost try to take those out of the equation. Like, don't do anything with the hands, don't do anything with the feet. Just make a pivot and tighten everything up, right? And you're essentially trying to hit the ball with your sternum, your belly button, whatever. You're just trying to do it totally with body rotation. And it's the whole thing was the dog wags the tail doesn't wag the dog. Blah, 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 blah. No, well, yeah, sure, the tail doesn't wag the dog. Like, your arms aren't moving your body, but your arms are, and your hands are. And so this circles back around to what I was talking about when you find like where you need to be top of the backswing position. By understanding what's happening at the feet, and by understanding more importantly what's happening at the hands, it helps you arrange things in the middle at the core movements much better, at your center of gravity, your pelvis, right? So ultimately you have to have good pelvis movements, right? So that's important too. Where things go, everything's important, right? But in terms of how you find out how to arrange things, what are the tools in your toolbox that allow you to do that? Well, it's the hands by a mile and the feet secondarily. And if you can do that, if you can understand what's happening at the hands and then start to get an idea what's happening at the feet, then everything else is much easier to arrange. Because what I used to do is I would turn my hips a certain amount, turn my shoulders a certain amount, and then I would try to build my arm swing on top of the shoulders. And it made sense kind of at the time on paper, but then when I'd look at my swing and go, that's not right. That doesn't look right. And then I put my hands in the right spot. Go, that's where the hands are supposed to be. And so I try to do it again. Move the hips a certain way, core movement, center of gravity, build from the pivot out. Michael Hebron, inside moves the outside, build the shoulders on top of it, swing the arms. I know what the arm swing does, build on top of the pivot. Nope, things are not being coordinated properly. And then finally, around the time of the apostrophe, I go, okay, no. The hands go here no matter what. Now arrange everything backwards. So you got to back calculate from the hands to the center of gravity and from the feet up to the center of gravity. So everything's working from the ground up to the center of gravity, but not going farther. And then everything works from the outside of the circle, the radius of the club head, into the handle. The handle's the last piece of you, right? So it's the last thing you can control. And everything's working backwards from the hands back to the center of the circle. Center of the rotation, center of the movement, center of the ellipse, center of the curvilinear activity, whatever fancy jargon you want to put on it. But it's from the feet up and it's from the hands back, right? So you're flanking all those movements that you're making with your body. So you're not building from your center of gravity out. You're building from everything back toward the center of gravity of your body, right? And primarily the hands. Because if you figured out what the feet did but didn't do what the hands do, you'd still have some huge problems. But if you figure out what the hands do, then you have a chance to then back calculate almost all the way down to the ground of the feet, and then get a handle on what the feet do, and then the feet back up to the center of gravity, and now you've got it surrounded. That's how it works. And there's a lot more to say about this. So we'll keep talking. See you.